of Providence said this night that Reverend Louis Edward Gelano, 96, the former Bishop of Providence, passed away Thursday at St. Antoine Residence in North Smithfield. Prior to his resignation in June 1997, Gelano held the position of 6th Bishop of Providence from January 1972. He was the second longest-serving bishop in Providence. According to the diocese, Gelano, who served over 600,000 Catholics while serving as bishop, passed away quietly. Gelano was named Bishop of Providence by Pope St. Paul Virgin Islands on December 6, 1971, and on January, Burlington Bishop Robert Francis Joyce consecrated him as a bishop in the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul in Providence. 26, 1972. As the diocese claims that in his role as Bishop of Providence, Bishop Gelano placed a strong emphasis on the pastoral aspect of his role and delighted in visiting different parts of the diocese too, resulting in him frequently being called the People's Bishop, the diocese stated. The journal's Mark Patankin noted in a 2018 piece commemorating Gelano's 90th birthday that Gelano's style as bishop was to turn up for everything, including radio talk show interviews and even factories to welcome workers. In addition to ordaining over 120 priests, Gelano had to contend with a decline in the number of men pursuing priesthood. In response to the Second Vatican Council's request to reinstate a permanent diaconate, Gelano instituted a training program in 1973 and, 3 years later, consecrated the diocese's first permanent deacons, initially designating them as chaplains to state institutions and aides to the bishop, and assisted living facilities and eventually to parishes as well, according to the bishop. Gelano told Patankin that he was worried about the priesthood's demise. The diocese informed Patankin that by 2018, Rhode Island had only 40 active priests, down from 306 when Gelano came in 1972 and 220 when he departed in 1997. There were fewer churches as well. Gelano was likewise worried about the waning of religious belief. "It's a cultural change," Gelano commented. "People are distracted. They want to go where they're entertained, so they aren't reaching out to religion as a priority in their lives. It is completely at odds with our values." According to Patankin, he was struck by Gelano's openness, even about difficult matters like the church sex abuse scandal. He questioned Gelano about lawyers' allegations of abuse cover-up and the diocese's $14 million settlement of dozens of claims in 2002. "We established an office to deal with that as soon as I found out. And it remains to expose the truth," Gelano remarked. Nevertheless, he expressed remorse and sadness. Gelano remarked, "It's so contrary to what we stand for. We think our job is to help individuals live by the commandments and turn away from sin. It hurt a lot that we would be involved in things ourselves. So immoral and wicked." Gelano continued to be involved even after he retired as a bishop. As Bishop Emeritus, he supported Bishop Robert E. Mulvey, his successor. He was the chaplain of St. Antoine Residence and Villa for over a decade. Bishop Thomas J. Tobin presented Bishop Gelano with a Lumen Gentium Award in 2017 in appreciation of his devoted and consistent service to the Diocese of Providence. As Patankin pointed out in the 2018 piece, he continued to wear his Roman collar every day. Born in Burlington, Vermont, Gelano received his priestly ordination on June 5, 1954. The Diocese of Providence regretfully announces the passing of Most Reverend Louis Edward Gelano, DD.JC. Bishop Emeritus of Providence, LSTL, passed away quietly at St. Antoine Residence in North Smithfield on November 7, 2024, at the age of 96. Prior to his retirement on June 11, 1997, Bishop Gelano held the position of 6th Bishop of Providence for over 25 years, beginning on January 26, 1972. And obtained a licentiate in canon law from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and a licentiate in sacred theology from St. Paul's University in Ottawa, Canada. He received his priesthood ordination on June 5, 1954, and worked for the Diocese of Burlington as a vicar general, chancellor, hospital chaplain, assistant pastor, assistant chancellor, and diocese director of the Society of the Propagation of the Faith. He was named Bishop of Providence by Pope St. Paul Virgin Islands on December 6, 1971. On January 2, 1972, Burlington Bishop Robert Francis Joyce installed him as a bishop in Providence's Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul. Because of his emphasis on the pastoral aspect of his role as Bishop of Providence and his love of visiting with God's people across the diocese, Bishop Gelano is frequently referred to as the People's Bishop. Bishop Gelano established the Immaculate Heart of Mary Community in August 1974 in an effort to better meet the spiritual needs of Rhode Island's expanding Hispanic immigrant population and to obtain more Spanish-speaking members of the clergy. After visiting Haiti in the 1970s, Bishop Gelano founded the Providence Haiti Outreach Initiative, beginning every year. He consecrated almost 120 men to the priesthood while serving as a bishop. He also started a training program in 1973 in response to the Second Vatican Council's call to reinstate a permanent diaconate. 3 years later, he ordained the first permanent deacons in the Diocese of Providence, initially appointing them as chaplains to state institutions and nursing homes and then to parishes. In order to spend more time in the parishes, ministries, and among the people, he established the vicariate structure, which is still in use today, to organize diocesan administration and ministries. Catholic Youth Ministry. His episcopal motto, Rejoice in Hope, was selected for the name of the Cranston-based facility, which is still in existence today. Bishop Gelano began a successful $40 million, 3-year capital campaign in February 1995 dubbed Vision of Hope, to give parishes, projects, and ministries long-term funding. In addition to his weekly column in the Providence Visitor, now known as Rhode Island Catholic, titled Ask the Bishop, he also frequently appeared on his own television program, Rejoice in Hope, which was aired on local Catholic cable TV during his tenure as Bishop of Providence. Bishop Gelano was awarded a number of honorary degrees, including doctorates in law from Mount St. Joseph College, humane letters from Salve Regina University, and religious education from Providence College. Our Lady of Providence College Seminary's Doctor of Divinity, Roger Williams College's Doctor of Humane Letters, Brown University's Doctor of Divinity, Assumption College's Doctor of Humane Letters, Bryant College's Doctor of Humanities, and Riviere College's Doctor of Divinity. The Holy Father approved his resignation on June 11, 1997, after he served as Bishop of Providence for more than 25 years, the second longest tenure in diocesan history. After retiring, he kept helping his successor as Bishop Emeritus and the Diocesan Tribunal's Defender of the Bond. He was the chaplain of St. Antoine Residence and Villa in North Smithfield, Rhode Island, for over a decade. Bishop Gelano in 2017 was Bishop Thomas J. Tobin presented him with a Lumen Gentium Award in recognition of his devoted and consistent service to the Diocese of Providence. 6 nieces and nephews survive him, and his brothers Robert and Norman predeceased him. Plans for the funeral and burial will be revealed later. Instead of flowers, gifts can Providence, R.I.W.P.R.I. The 6th Bishop of the Diocese of Providence, the Most Reverend Louise Gelano, has passed away according to 12 News. Gelano died quietly at the St. Antoine Residence in North Smithfield on Thursday, according to the Diocese of Providence. He was 96. After more than 20 years as a bishop, Gelano retired in June 1997. In December 1971, Pope St. Paul Virgin Islands appointed the Vermont native for the first time. Because of his reputation for visiting the diocese to engage with God's people, Gelano was sometimes called to as the People's Bishop during his tenure. He was the bishop with the second longest tenure during the diocesan era. Portland, Oregon. Brian Wheeler, who was the Portland Trail Blazers radio voice from 1998 until 2019, passed away. He was 62. Wheeler, often known as Wheels, passed away on Friday after a protracted illness, according to the Trail Blazers. Before spending 21 seasons in Portland, Wheeler played for the Chicago Bulls, Sacramento Kings, and Seattle Supersonics. Renowned for saying "Boom Shakalaka," in 2007, Wheeler received the Oregon Sportscaster of the Year award. The organization said in a statement on Saturday that his love for the game and passion for the Trailblazers came through in every radio call, making each play a thrill for every listener tuning in. New York. For the first time, the Milwaukee Bucks had cause to be proud of themselves, or at least feel. However, the Bucks lost to the New York Knicks 116-94 at Madison Square Garden on Friday night as a result of that performance. And following the defeat, Bucks star Giannis Antetokounmpo expressed his displeasure with the team's performance. Editor's selections. The Bucks overcome a historically sluggish start by saying, "You can never be the team to fold." 2D Jamal Collier. Is it real? Considering the three-point assault, AD's explosive start, and 6 other early NBA trends. 4D Kevin Pelton. The performance, according to Antetokounmpo, was particularly discouraging because it followed 3 consecutive games in which the Bucks, who are now tied for 13th place in the Eastern Conference after dropping to 2-7, they gave themselves a chance to win by playing hard. He claimed the squad lacked heart against the Knicks rather than expanding on it. Have we played the last game? Indeed. Did we play the 2 previous games? Indeed. Were we in a competition today? No, he responded. You will not win the game if you don't compete fiercely. At the very least, you must give yourself a chance. After a fantastic performance last night, we traveled to New York. Then we lose by 30 when we get here. Do you feel comfortable not competing? That bothers me. Boston will be here in 2 days. We will lose by 30, and we don't compete. Doc Rivers, the coach of the Bucks, and Antetokounmpo both cited the Knicks. A Knicks player dived on the floor and recovered the ball for an extra possession after 3 of his players knelt to recover it during the first half. Putting effort aside, Milwaukee's general aging and sluggish appearance doesn't help. The Knicks center Karl Anthony Towns, 32 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, burned the Bucks, who formerly had one of the league's greatest defenses, from long range and frequently drove past Brook Lopez for easy baskets. The Bucks had absolutely no response to Towns. Since the Bucks traded stopper Drew Holiday and acquired star player Damian Lillard prior to the 2023-24 season, the point-of-attack defense has changed, making it one of the most vulnerable in the NBA. Going in terms of defending pick-and-roll ball handlers, the Bucks came in at number 28 out of 30 teams. Only Detroit and Atlanta have had greater problems per possession. With Antetokounmpo and Lillard, the Bucks offense hasn't been all that strong either, finishing 21st in the NBA. As a coach, I have to figure out how to get Bobby Portis moving forward. Rivers stated, Lopez has also had trouble figuring out how to be offensive. However, Antetokounmpo stated that until the team plays harder more consistently, everything from coaching to shooting luck is irrelevant. At the end of the day, we've got to compete. Antetokounmpo, who finished with 12 rebounds and 24 points, stated, teams will provide us with more than simply games. They will not feel sorry for us. We must compete for each and every possession. We must put a body on the ground and put it on the line for every loose ball. However, we didn't even compete. Katu, Portland, Oregon. The loss of former radio broadcaster Brian Wheeler is being mourned by the Portland Trail Blazers family and thousands of fans. On Friday, November 8th, Brian Wheeler, popularly known as Wheels, passed away. Between 1998 and 2019, Wheeler voiced the Blazers for 21 seasons. In recognition of his influence on the sports culture of the state, Wheels was voted Oregon Sportscaster of the Year in 2007. The industry still makes extensive use of his famous trademark call, Boom Shakalaka, and in a statement issued on Saturday, November 9th, the Blazers stated, fan favorite to this day inside Moda Center. Wheels started his career in radio while he was a student at Loyola University in Chicago. After stints with the Chicago Bulls, Seattle Supersonics, and Sacramento Kings and Monarchs, Wheeler arrived in Portland. On flagship station 750 The Game and then Rip City Radio 620, Wheels also aired a local radio program. Links that are promoted. Heading that is empty. Every radio call was filled with his enthusiasm for the Trailblazers and his love for the game, which made every play exciting for everyone listening. Wheels' post-win statement, and once again we can say, it's a great day to be a Blazer, is something we cherish while we grieve his departure. Wheeler took Bill Schonely's place as the Blazers legend. Bubble of comments. Participate in the chat. 3. Author's note. After working together at 750 The Game, I rejoined Brian Wheeler as his producer at iHeartMedia's Rip City Radio. For anyone who admired the Portland Trail Blazers, Wheels was a legend. And his ability to call games for the team we love was a blessing for sports fans. On occasion, Brian would stand in as a game caller for the Arizona Diamondbacks' short-season Single-A team, the Hillsboro Hops. Hearing him call baseball was a treat. You could never have encountered a more generous person than Brian. He would pause and talk to any Blazers supporters that came up to him. He enjoyed doing things for the fans, and they reciprocated his affection. We shall miss him. My friend will be missed. According to Eggers, Wheeler was the Blazers' radio voice from 1998 until 2019. Bill Schonely, a legendary radio presenter, was swiftly replaced by him. Out of his own home with fervent shouts and a loud voice. Portland, Oregon. Brian Wheeler, who was the Portland Trail Blazers radio voice from 1998 until 2019, passed away. He was 62. Wheeler, often known as Wheels, passed away on Friday after a protracted illness, according to the Trail Blazers. Before spending 21 seasons in Portland, Wheeler played for the Chicago Bulls, Sacramento Kings, and Seattle Supersonics. Renowned for saying "Boom Shakalaka," in 2007, Wheeler received the Oregon Sportscaster of the Year award. The organization said in a statement on Saturday that his love for the game and passion for the Trailblazers came through in every radio call, making each play a thrill for every listener tuning in. Lesbian feminist activist, luminary, poet, mom, and award-winning author of books including Cave Dweller and Bastard Out of Carolina, Dorothy Allison, passed away at the age of 75. Allison wrote with energy and passionate affection about an impoverished, queer South. Her novels openly address topics that have previously been taboo, like a sexual assault, and featured people who are underappreciated on hegemonic bookshelves. Allison fueled a burgeoning feminist movement in the 1970s. As I saw it, part of my role was to be a kind of evangelical lesbian feminist. Allison wrote about her years as an activist in Florida and Washington, D.C., and to contribute to the creation of a political analysis of this society that despises women. Her literary ambitions were satisfied by her socially conscious work in the 1980s. In addition to contributing essays, poetry, and editorial commentary to publications like Quest, Out/Look, The Village Voice, and Conditions, Allison served as editor of the feminist publication Amazing Grace. The Lesbian Sex Mafia, the oldest continuously running women's BDSM support and education group in the country, was founded by Allison and Joe Arnone. Allison devoted herself entirely to prose following the widespread success of her debut collection, Trash. She authored novels, poetry, and what she proudly referred to as smut. Poor gay women in crises were frequently the focus of her efforts. It can have an autobiographical undertone. Writing Bastard Out of Carolina became ultimately the way to claim my family's pride and tragedy, and the embattled sexuality I had fashioned on a base of violence and abuse, Allison said of her best-known book. Author Caitlin Greenidge shared one of her more sharp essays and lamented Allison in a beautiful Substack memory that was distributed this morning. If you're reading angry remarks on social media about how much, Greenidge remarked, I highly recommend reading Allison's essay A Question of Class. Someone is not going to care after Tuesday, gloating about turning inward and shutting down. I highly recommend reading Allison's essay A Question of Class, Greenidge commented, adding that someone is not going to care after Tuesday, gloating about turning inward and shutting down. The article was released in 1994. This is a passage. Some people start to think that the safety of their families and communities rely on the subjugation of others, which is a terrible consequence of racism, bigotry, and class stratification. There must be people whose lives are cruelly cut short. This civilization is dominated by this belief. It is the reason why the middle class despises the poor and why the poor whites of the South are so adamantly racist. It's a misconception that lets some people think they create their own life. A goad and a drive to the working class's periphery. A secret core of guilt for the middle class, and enough to make the impoverished and homeless feel unrestrained in their anger and violence. When we consider how there is still a great deal of exclusion and fear, and how many of us do not feel secure, even in the lesbian and feminist communities where we have given the politics of marginalization a great deal of attention, the myth's strength becomes even more clear. Being poor, despised, and the victim of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse as a child taught me that suffering is not a sign of greatness. It ruins. In order to avoid devastation, self-loathing, or eternal despair, we must toss. To reject false myths and simple morals, to view ourselves as human, imperfect, and unique, to break free from the indoctrination of hatred, and to overcome the fear of becoming the they that is so contemptuously discussed. Every one of us, according to sinister wisdom, Allison, who had cancer, passed away at her Northern California home on Wednesday. According to Literary Hub, Allison wrote about a queer, poor South with dynamism and ferocious love. Her writings openly discuss topics that have historically been taboo, such as sexual assault and underappreciated characters. On the hegemonic shelves, her life was reflected in her books. She was born in Greenville, South Carolina, in 1949. According to Sinister Wisdom, Allison had a difficult childhood marked by poverty and sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, while her mother was only 15 years old. She obtained bachelor's and master's degrees through scholarships, and in the 1970s and 1980s, she got active in the feminist and lesbian rights organizations in New York City, Florida, and Washington, D.C. She started editing the feminist newspaper Amazing Grace and wrote essays and poems for LGBTQ+ and other magazines. She was a member of the editorial board of the lesbian feminist journal Conditions. In an essay for Sinister Wisdom, she wrote, "I looked around and felt my heart thudding between my breasts while sitting on the floor at editorial meetings discussing writing and manuscripts and how women might work toward a more just and equitable world. Every single one of us was adored by me. Even while we argued about line breaks in a poetry or essay structure, I really enjoyed what we were attempting to accomplish." Muddy. Dozens of the faithful assembled to celebrate the glory of Saint Iosaf, Joseph, of Belgorod in the modest, incense-filled church as rhythmic prayers turned into music. The 100th anniversary of Saint Iosaf of Belgorod's glorification was celebrated on Saturday at Saint Iosaf's Russian Orthodox Church in Muddy. That was the day the bishop was declared a saint in 1911. His Grace Bishop Peter Lowe celebrated the service. This is what the Russian businessman is pleading. An oppressive bureaucratic system is the wall. Does that sound familiar? Ironically, President Reagan had to deal with a similar problem in the United States in the early 1980s. In his situation, the biggest barriers to investment and the establishment of new businesses were high taxes. According to Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, starting and expanding high-tech firms is currently severely hampered by a bureaucratic and corrupt system. Russia has plenty of resources and intelligence. However, the system structure needs to be changed, and only strong political will can bring about a good outcome. As a result of President Reagan's economic strategy, one of the most persistent bull markets in our history began. It was particularly crucial to lower capital gains taxes in order to encourage investment in high-risk technological endeavors. Whether President Medvedev's reforms and initiatives will have a Reagan-esque effect on Russia is too soon to say. He's off to an excellent start, though. He made a groundbreaking proposal to eliminate capital gains taxes on long-term investments beginning in 2011 at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum last week. Additionally, he is going to Silicon Valley this week to network and meet with Vladimir Putin. Established the crucial macroeconomic foundation during the last 10 years. He instituted a far lower and more straightforward flat tax, at 13% on personal income, in place of the harsh and confusing tax structure of the 1990s. 20% of business profits. Government revenues reached all-time highs as a result of additional capital gains tax cuts that promoted capitalism. Furthermore, as everyone acknowledges, booming, a component of the recovery formula. But the Russian government's fiscal restraint enabled it to pay off its Paris Club debt, establish a substantial rainy day fund, and amass the third-largest foreign exchange and gold reserves, after China and Japan. Additionally, these regulations had a significant social influence. In 1999, 41.5% of Russians lived below the poverty line. By 2005, that number had dropped to 12.1%. The effects of the global recession have been severe and devastating in more recent times. However, Russia has managed to withstand the current economic storm by building a solid economic foundation after the turbulent 1990s storm. It is presently in a strong position to recover economically. However, if Russia does not modernize, encourage innovation, and permit additional infrastructure development, its recovery might be temporary. Realizing this, Medvedev is now concentrating his efforts on the microeconomy, particularly promoting private company development and entrepreneurship in Russia by reducing the impact of onerous obstacles that stand in the way. Skalkovo, often called Inograd, Inno for innovation and grad, being an Old Slavic term for city, is one way to tackle this issue. Located just outside of Moscow, Skalkovo is the site of the Moscow School of Management, a brand new postgraduate school dedicated to preparing entrepreneurs and leaders for emerging markets. Some have referred to it as Silicon Valley of the future for Russia. But this might, with an independent court founded on the rule of law, respect for global business norms, and a cutting-edge technological infrastructure, Skalkovo is expected to give Russia a new foundation upon which to modernize. Above all, it should be a location where the most talented individuals can freely create and invent. There is no lack of legitimate criticism, especially considering Russia's history of widespread government participation. Additionally, Medvedev appears to agree that developing a new template is crucial. Skalkovo cannot prosper by imposing modernization requirements. Deeds from above won't not work. The government should create the right conditions and incentives before letting entrepreneurship develop naturally. Second, it can't be about a single location. The Skalkovo concept and infrastructure must eventually spread over the whole nation, from Vladivostok to Kaliningrad. Third, there needs to be open competition, particularly for monopolized government services, in order for modernization and real reform to thrive and corruption to fade. This week, President Medvedev and his team will meet with venture capitalists and technology leaders on their first visit to Silicon Valley as a Russian head of state. More significantly, they will meet business owners, share ideas, and take a tour of garage startups, which are Silicon Valley's innovation incubators. All in an attempt to encourage a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship throughout Russia. Why is this Herculean task a good fit for Medvedev? The president himself was an entrepreneur, which is a little-known fact. Early in the 90s, he founded a business in his hometown of St. Petersburg when he was 25 years old. He is as tech-savvy as Barack Obama these days, frequently using the internet and commenting on Facebook. The Western venture capitalists assembled at the Russian president's home in Russia were deeply impressed by his Moscow 3 weeks ago to talk about Russian entrepreneurship. One of my coworkers said, following over an hour and a half of talking with President Medvedev on startups and technology investment, he understands an early gauge of investor confidence in Medvedev's capacity to successfully modernize the Russian economy. This glowing praise comes from a jaded venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. Peter N. Lukyanov is a managing partner and co-founder of Almaz Capital Partners, a Silicon Valley and Moscow-based venture capital firm that specializes in investments relating to Russia and the CIS. That I was requested politely to take off my tie by a well-dressed Russian woman before the president of Russia entered the Printers Incorporated cafe. Our president will not be wearing a tie today, she stated. After all, this is California. I gave in. Shortly after, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev walked into the coffee shop in Palo Alto wearing blue pants, a light blue blazer, and an open-collar shirt. He grinned widely and said, "Hey there, how is things going?" The Russians gathered around him all said, "Korosho," in unison. This marked the start of Medvedev's 2-hour coffee clatch with 24 Russian entrepreneurs and technologists, who now reside in Silicon Valley last Wednesday. Despite being American, I received an invitation to the event by my buddy Andrei Kunov, who planned the gathering and serves as the director of the American Business Association of Russian-Speaking Professionals, AMBER. Naturally, the meeting's proposal didn't arrive. Unexpectedly, Kunov had already planned a trip to Moscow for about 24 venture capitalists in May. Medvedev had hosted them at his house. Eugene Mazzo is the guest writer for today's post on the oil and the glory, a lawyer specializing in Russian politics, situated in Palo Alto, California. During Russian President Dmitry Medvedev's visit to Silicon Valley last week, Mazzo, far right in the above photo, joined 24 Russian technologists for a casual coffee. According to his assessment, Medvedev now desired to visit like-minded individuals in a comfortable setting over coffee on their own territory. He was interested in their thoughts on Skolkovo, which he characterizes as a Russian Silicon Valley in the Moscow outskirts. How could he replicate the Silicon Valley startup and venture capital culture in Russia? How was he able to discourage gifted Russians from dropping everything and relocating to California? In person, Medvedev is curious, approachable, and open to conversation and debate despite his confidence, which may be considered arrogance. He seemed to me more like a professor than a president in that regard. He was aware that he had reached the promised land of technology. A cliché regarding the valley was reiterated by one of the Russian businesspeople in attendance. It is not a place but a state of mind. However, Medvedev already appeared to understand this. In order to comprehend how business is conducted here, you must take in the way everything functions, breathes, and appears, Medvedev remarked. He stated, "This has so far all just been great to watch but very different from how business was conducted in Russia. I came here primarily to check what needed to be fixed. Tell me, aside from the people, what should I bring back to Russia from here? Of course, these are significant, but is there anything else I could take?" According to a number of the Russians, the valley is a place where people may openly exchange ideas because it has few walls. Once more, Medvedev appeared to get this, acknowledging that the Russian government's involvement in Skolkovo's activities needed to be evaluated. He replied, "We can give a small push." He used the Russian word talchak, but just a push. It seemed to me that Medvedev needed to become more realistic when he turned to face me, I informed him that there was no direct flight between San Francisco and Moscow. "That's not true," he shot back, interrupting me. "Yesterday I took a direct flight here." I continued to poke fun at him when the laughing subsided. Therefore, buying 2 new aircraft should be the Russian government's primary priority. Every night, have one depart from Skolkovo for San Francisco and the other go in the other direction from San Francisco. I uttered, "If you foot the bill for the airline tickets, in a year you will have Silicon Valley." Of course, that was a glaring oversimplification, but Medvedev understood. "Do you think Obama would allow this?" he inquired. There was now some business in the vein of Silicon Valley. Medvedev was given a napkin by California venture capitalist Peter Lukyanov, who makes investments in Russian tech firms. Lukyanov had recently outlined a plan for improving cooperation between Silicon Valley and Russia on it. His plan was to create a permanent video connection that would allow business owners on both sides to communicate at any time. Lukyanov asserted, "The more contact, the better. When Americans and Russians get together, they often find that they have more in common than not, and out of this, business relationships develop." The guy who had invited me to the coffee, Andrei Kunov, pulled a 1-page business plan from his pocket a few minutes later and gave it to Medvedev as well. It described the establishment of a Russian-American innovation center in Palo Alto that would operate with institutional support from the Russian government. Medvedev's desire to diversify Russia's economy comes off as earnest and serious. However, he is not the first Moscow leader to think about this concept. Almost 20 years ago, Lukyanov himself hosted a conference on the Russian technology is being developed and sold overseas with the help of Mikhail Gorbachev's entourage.